They called this frequently fog-shrouded valley in the Allegheny Mountains the Hell Stretch. It was the first stop on the first transcontinental airmail route. Pilots dreaded it. Now, in 1918, the U.S. Postal Service started airmail between Washington and New York. 2 years later, they were ready to try flying all the way across the country.
100 years ago today, a small biplane, piloted by a brave pilot, took off from Hazelhurst Field, a few miles from here. It's where Roosevelt is now. It was on the first leg of the original transcontinental airmail service.
Tuesday, a small group of pilots, post office workers, and airmail enthusiasts gathered at Republic Airport on Long Island to honor and recreate that first flight.
And anytime you do any sort of research about the airmail, you got all these photographs from the Smithsonian come up of all these pilots in these big coveralls and flying helmets and standing there either chomping on a cigar or jaunty with a cigarette in their hand. And I thought, wow, I wonder what other airmail fields there were.
Bill Moore, an Omaha-based pilot, writer, and historian, wondered how many of the original airmail landing strips still exist.
There aren't that many of the original airfields still around. Chicago's Maywood Field, that became a golf course. The Reno's airfield, that became a golf course. So you've got, just a handful of these places. In fact, the first one is Iowa City, was the first airfield to the west that actually is still an operational airfield.
And that led to Airmail 100 Centennial flights and the recruiting of volunteers to fly commemorative postcards between each of the 16 original landing fields. Well, as close to each of the original landing fields as you can get today.
Today, this kind of marks where aviation came into its own. The reliability, the trust, and everything that we look back on and take for granted today go back to this very moment 100 years ago.
Freeze will fly the first leg from Long Island to Bellefonte, Pennsylvania. Two nice ladies from the post office hand-canceled the postal covers, and many of them from local Boy Scouts. The mailbag is sealed, and Freeze is on his way to November '96. Today's Bellefonte Airport is about 8 miles from that original airmail strip, but the history is well represented by a mural in the family-owned FBO.
But they actually showed a storm coming in from the west, which is typical and often unexpected. And that's why this became known as Hell Stretch, because they lost more airmail pilots in this particular section of the airmail route than any place else.
More commemorative postcards added to the mailbag, and a handoff to the next volunteer pilot. Next stop, Cleveland.
I've read a lot about the airmail pilots from 1920 to 1925, and for me, these guys were heroes. They flew in all kinds of weather. They were groundbreakers, and to be able to trace what they did just kind of gives me goosebumps. I've watched movies of them, I've looked at the charts, and I can't wait to see some of the landmarks as I leave here, because I'm going to fly over the same landmarks, and I literally have goosebumps that I'm getting to do this.